Hello and thank you for joining me for a city tour downtown Kassel. My name is Gerhard Mekefer from Team Mekis Audio Tours, and I will try to make your tour here today as interesting and enjoyable as possible. Martinskirche, also called St. Martin, is an evangelical parish church and the preaching center of the Bishop of the Protestant Diocese Kurhessen-Waldeck. The Gothic construction was started in 1364 and sacred as a Catholic church in 1462. It was built according to the model of the mighty Elisabethkirche in Marburg, which also features two spires. In accordance with the transgression of Landgrave Philip to the Protestant Church in 1524, Martinskirche became Protestant as well. In the church, the Hessian Landgraves were buried starting in the early 16th century until the late 18th century. During World War II, Martinskirche was severely damaged. Today's appearance is a massively changed version of the original building. The building is a three-aisle tall church featuring a western addition with two spires. On weekdays, you may enter the church through the side entrance on its right. In 1830, the city of Kassel expanded and got a new district called Freiheit. Due to an increase of population, a new church became necessary. But as the building of a church was quite expensive, back then, the Bishop of Mainz, who was in charge of the construction, offered indulgence to each citizen who supported the construction. The construction process started around 1360. According to the vision of Landgrave Heinrich II, 1328 to 1376, it should become the biggest church of Kassel, a Hessian cathedral. This cathedral then should become the religious center of a newly founded diocese Hessen that would no longer be under the rule of the Bishop of Mainz. But those plans never became reality. Nevertheless, the church was appointed as an abbey church featuring 12 abbots in 1366, still during the construction process. That appointment was confirmed by Pope Urban V when another construction phase was completed and the church could be handed to the diocese. Multiple members of the diocese also had positions at court until the Reformation. After Landgrave Karl brought a piece of the Holy Cross to Kassel in 1437, Martinskirche was often referred as the Abbey of the Holy Cross. However, the construction works proceeded very slowly. After another two construction phases, some arches of the nave collapsed and had to be rebuilt in 1440. In 1462, the church was completely finished and could be inaugurated. Back then, the church only featured a small belfry above the choir. The huge western steeples, we still can see today, initially remained 2 stories and unfinished. 20 years later, between 1483 and 1487, the southern tower got a 3rd story, and another 80 years later, around 1564, it was expanded to 4 stories by Hans von Ulm. That 4th story was a remarkable octagonal construction, just as it was en vogue in the Renaissance era. It was topped by a so-called Welsh bonnet, a roof similar to the one of Frauenkirche in Munich. Welsh being a medieval expression for Southern European. In the Westphalia area, King Jerome tried to relocate the diocesan chapter from Paderborn to Kassel and thus to turn Martinskirche into a cathedral. Those plans, it is assumed, were not realized due to a veto by Napoleon Bonaparte himself. From 1889 to 1892, the Renaissance roof of the southern tower was removed and replaced by a neo-Gothic fifth story featuring a pointed roof. At the same time, the northern tower was built the same shape and height. In October 1943, the medieval roof construction and the interior of the church burned down. The vault collapsed and all that remained were the ground levels of the towers. The walls of the longhouse and the choir, including its arch, even though severely damaged. The reconstruction of Martinskirche took place between 1954 and 1960, conducted by Heinrich Otto Vogel of Trier. In order to reclaim its dominating effect within the newly created cityscape, the remaining neo-Gothic parts of the towers were pulled down and replaced by 4 modern stories, which you can see today. The only old parts that were implemented into the renewed building were the outer walls. But the architect again created a 3-aisled hall. But now it is featuring a folding vault sitting on very thin pillars. During the reconstruction process, it was the wish of the diocese to have a small area for Mass, which can still be combined with the huge hall of the church building used for concerts. Thus, the architect implemented a glass wall in a concrete frame between choir and longhouse that dominates the interior appearance today. So far for the church's history, but I have some more information concerning the crypts of the Landgraves. Back in medieval times, Martinskirche, like all churches back then, also served as a burial place. In the choir you can find the tombs of multiple canons, and the longhouse features tombs of important citizens of Kassel. When Landgrave Philip converted to Protestantism in 1524, there occurred a problem concerning the death. Up to 1570, the official burial place for the Hessian Landgraves were the Elizabeth Church in Marburg. But said church belonged to the German order and was thus Catholic. Based on that situation, a royal crypt was implemented below the choir of Martinskirche. The first person to be buried there was the son of Landgrave Philip, who died as an infant. Up to 1637, all Landgraves of Hesse, including their relatives, were buried here. Of special importance is the funerary monument of Landgrave Philip. The epitaph has a height of almost 12 meters and is made of marble and alabaster. It originally was positioned above the first crypt of the choir. After Philip's death, the monument was ordered by his son William IV and finished in 1572. Apart of some biblical scenes, it depicts Philip and his wife. Luckily, the epitaph survived both world wars relatively unscathed. During the rebuilding of the choir, it was moved to the Long Hall. It is renovated in 2004 and some parts were completed. After the death of William V, also known as Wilhelm the Steady, in 1637, a second princely tomb was installed below the former chapter house. Wilhelm was buried there with a delay of 3 years in 1640. The final funeral in this princely tomb took place in 1693. About 35 members of the electoral family found their final place of rest here. The second princely tomb was used up to 792. All the territorial princes who ruled after that point of time had been buried elsewhere. After World War II, many parts of the Second Vault fell victim to tomb raiders who were mainly interested in the metal used there. However, the biggest damage was made by the parish itself, as it decided on having the temp be cleared out by mechanical diggers. Of the 38 coffins that were buried in the second tomb, only 6 of the most meaningful of them remain strongly fragmented, and the mortal remains are mostly lost. The first vault, however, survived World War II relatively unscathed. It was impenetrably bricked up. The second vault can be visited upon arrangement. We are now positioned at the square in front of Market Hall of Kassel, which is also called Marstall, Royal Stables. This facility was erected by Landgrave Wilhelm IV, also known as Wilhelm the Wise, in the time between 1591 and 1593, according to Weser Renaissance designs, and served as royal stables. Master builders in charge were the brothers Hans and Hieronymus Müller, who created a four-winged Renaissance complex with wide voluted gables. As you may guess from the name, the building initially served for a domicile for the royal horses and coaches. Apart from that, the building also featured an armory, an art room, a tailor shop and more, for example a room for scientific experiments, a print shop and a mind. In 1633, Wilhelm IV even moved his precious library from the Renthof on the other side of the street to Marstall. Thus, Marstall is the oldest museum and library complex of Kassel. From 1866 to 1910, Marstall served as barracks of a part of the Hussars regiment. After that, many shops settled here. During World War II, Marstall completely burned down. In 1955, the state of Hesse gave the ruin of the building to the city of Kassel without charge. The hygienic conditions remained a problem back then. Additionally, Königsplatz could not deal with the ever-increasing traffic on market days any longer, and a solution was urgently needed. In the early stages of the 1960s, it was decided to rebuild Marstall according to its original design and to use it as a market hall. Initially, it had been planned to simply gut the ruins interior and complete the remaining outer walls. 1 year later, it was decided, however, to rebuild the complex from scratch. The entire ruin was torn down and rebuilt according to historic designs. The teardown began in 1962, and it was rebuilt of the natural stones saved during the destruction. In April 1965, the meat market moved into the finished building, and a little later the fruit and vegetable stalls from Königsplatz followed. In 1994, there was a huge alteration to the building. Both floors were connected by a central stairway, and two central ceiling holes enable sunlight to shine through the glass roof onto the lower floors. The market stalls were renewed and rearranged. In 2008, the market hall received a new roof and new windows. The facade was mended and the historic figures on the ledges renewed. In order to save energy, a recuperator was installed, which uses the warmth of the cooling system to heat the water. Market Hall actually only covers the ground floor and first floor. The attic is home of multiple documents on the city's history, which belong to the municipal archive. More than 70 vendors from Kassel and the bordering regions sell regional and imported products on 2 floors and open space in front of the hall. The market hall is open from Thursday to Saturdays and regarded as one of the most beautiful market halls of Germany.